Hurrah! So my name is osfameron. I work for a company called My Society, and I'm going to talk about civic hacking. And that's a phrase that many people aren't actually aware of. And so obviously we write code, we program in Perl and other languages for various reasons. Some of them are because people pay us, and it's always nice to be able to eat and have a house and buy shiny toys. This is all really good. People also hack because of the intellectual challenge, because we like solving difficult problems. We're engineers, we're mathematicians, we're artists, or rock stars or code ninjas if we're Ruby programmers. So civic hacking's another reason that we might want to write code, and that's kind of to make the world a better place. And that sounds, very, possibly a little bit megalomaniac, but we'll have a look at something that's fairly kind of a fairly manageable way of doing this. So I'm going to talk about a tool called FixMyStreet's. And basically, I'll show you in a little bit, but it's a way to tell your local government, your town council, or your, I should have looked up what it's called in Bulgaria, but your local government that there's problems like potholes, or maybe a street light isn't working, or maybe someone's dumped a whole bunch of sofas on the middle of a road and someone really needs to come and clean and move them out of the way. But so it's a website that it allows other people to easily launch websites. So it's kind of like a toolkit for making your own software, for making your own website that does this. So this is FixMyStreet.com, which is our own version of this, and it's available in the UK. So as you can see there, you've got basically one big box that allows you to type in your address. And you've also got to locate me automatically, which does its best using HTML5 geolocation and so on. And so the very first thing we ask is, where are you? And we can then find out. So this is near where my co-working and hack space is, in Liverpool, in the northwest of England. And so people have already logged various problems, things like graffiti. There you go, mattress dumped on the side of the road, dumped boxes. So basically you can tell that Scousers are a bit messy sometimes. But not too many potholes. It's in the centre of town, so that bit's all quite good. So why do we show you those existing problems? Well, the reason is that we don't want 30 people reporting the same piece of graffiti. And there's a really good reason for that, because we're now going to contact the local town council and tell them about it. If they get 30 emails from us, they're going to go, well, they're a bunch of spammers, and not pay any attention. So it's really important that we try and discourage people from making duplicate reports. So then you can fill in data about this huge pothole, you can upload photos, and so on. And what happens next? So I'm not going to go into geocoding a lot. So if you were here for Alex's great talk just before, he talks a little bit about the challenge of that. We have a service called Mapit, which maps a latitude and longitude that we get from a geocoding service. And again, we use various ones, including OpenStreetMaps and Google and Bing. And we then map it to an administrative region, which might be Liverpool City Council, or it might be Merseyside, or it might be the government of the UK, or it might be the European Union. So you've got all these different levels of responsibility, and of course, depending on, is it a pothole? Well, clearly you're not going to write to the, the President of the EU about that, whereas Liverpool City Council may be a little bit more relevant. So we have a hierarchy of different sorts of location. And I'm not going to talk more about Mapit, and I'll tell you why in a bit. So first of all, I haven't actually introduced us. We're My Society, and so the very grandiose mission statement we have, we make websites and tools that empower citizens. So yeah, for democracy and getting things changed. And I'll give you a few examples of those. So in the UK, we have They Work For You, which allows you to find out what your Member of Parliament, so your elected representative, is doing. What have they spoken about? There's links to allow you to write letters to them if you're unhappy about what they're doing. You can find out how they voted on a variety of different issues. How did they vote for women's issues? Did they vote for the war in Iraq? Did they vote for all kinds of things. And we actually have a researcher, so not even a technical guy, a researcher who will look at every vote that happens in Parliament and categorise it so that we can give that kind of extra information. So we provide data beyond, value beyond just creating a website. And we've done that in other countries outside the UK. So we've created a generic platform called Pombola. We used in Kenya, Mzalendo, in South Africa, mostly African countries so far. And we also allow people to make freedom of information requests. And we publish them to allow people to view those and see what kind of things other people have been requesting. So it's a kind of, we're all about opening up data and making government accountable. So you may be asking, what the hell has a service to report potholes got to do with citizen power, and where does it fit into this? Now, I've forgotten his role, CEO, our boss, Tom Steinberg, who co-founded MySociety way back, is really clear on this. Basically, Fix My Street, he doesn't use these words, is like a gateway drug to citizen power, because many people have never, ever written to their elected representatives about anything at all. You go, politicians, they're all the same. Who wants to speak to an MP or a councillor? And you don't bother. So if you actually, you deal with the government because, you have to pay taxes, or you receive benefits, or you get arrested, or you get summoned to do jury service, or that kind of thing. Very few people voluntarily get in contact with their government. So, Fix My Street allows people to say, hey, there's a pothole, I'm going to do something about it. And obviously, if that pothole then gets fixed, which sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, depends on the council. We have stats, so we can name and shame the ones that don't. But if it gets fixed, people go, whoa, so hang on a sec, I just contacted government and they did something? And maybe that changes their perception about what you can do. So it's a way of making people feel powerful through software. So yay. So why am I telling you this? So Fix My Street is open sourced, and it's on GitHub, and it's largely written in Perl. So yay. So the bad news is, MySociety is not a Perl shop. We're a multi-language shop. We have code in Ruby and Python and Node, even little bits of PHP. We don't talk about that. And well, in fact, most of the people don't talk about the Perl code either. I'm very proud of it. So Fix My Street is written in Perl. Mapit, which was the geolocating to political entities, is written in Python, which is why I'm not going into huge details about that now. But so yeah, it's a good bit of Perl code. It uses Catalyst. It uses little bits of Moose. It's not entirely horrible and legacy. It's actually, it's quite a nice code base, but it is, it's getting on a little bit. It's not necessarily kind of a modern Perl or a very kind of new and trendy piece of code to hack on. It's kind of in maintenance mode. We're adding new features. We're working on it, very much for both charitable and commercial projects. But it's also nice to write new code. So before I go into the new code, here's just a few examples of Zurich paid us to do a custom website for them. We got some money from a charitable organization, I think Google, to create a website in the Philippines. We didn't even bother with the geocoder because it's so small that you basically want to have it's on this island or it's on that island, and then you kind of navigate. And also the geocoding for the Philippines happens to be really bad. Maybe Alex can give us some hints on that afterwards. And here's one that the guys in Uruguay have basically forked the code and done a whole load of design, and they've even extended it to have modern stuff like Twitter and Facebook integration, which is awesome. So you can see people are using it in different ways, either open source or as a paid product.
Hey, you have no idea how famous you actually are. Fix My Street is, for example, all over in Berlin. It's named every single time every even remotely similar project comes up. So
fantastic. Sushi is just saying that in Berlin, every time somebody mentions a similar project to this, then Fix My Street is always cited as one of the things. Yeah, so yay for us. I didn't want to blow my own trumpet, so thank you very much, Sushi, for doing that. So how do we then get in touch with local government to tell them about it. So we work out who to contact based on this administrative area, and then we have a database of potholes in Liverpool. Go to highways@liverpool.gov.uk, for example. That's probably not the address, don't email them. And whereas another category might go to cat rescuing from trees service at Liverpool, and more details about cats later. So we send them an email, and then they copy and paste the email into another service because they've got their own back-end web services. And this is good, right? Yeah, no, we can obviously do better than that. So what we want is some kind of plumbing to go from Fix My Street to these council services. And so we'll call some kind of API. And obviously every council uses a different service. So within the UK, there's XOR, Mayrise. Some people use SAP, I think, probably more common in the rest of Europe. MS Dynamics CRM, using SOAP. I see SOAP in my future. I'm delighted about this. And of course, one of the problems is that there's lots of different services. So every time a council wants us to integrate with them, it costs money. And it's inefficient, and it's not necessarily, the most fun that we could be having either. But, fair enough, it's all useful. So the ideal thing would be, what if there was some kind of open technology that we could leverage instead? And there's something called Open311, and that text is so boring that don't even start reading it. Here's some pretty pictures of somebody trying to rescue a cat from a tree. So my colleague Dave commissioned these pictures and did a lovely little blog post for people in councils to explain to them what is an open API. And basically, it's a discovery service. You can speak to it in a REST API, and it comes back with XML or JSON saying, hey, I can fix potholes or get pets down from trees. And you can get more information. So if you want to get a pet from a tree, you've got to tell it what kind of animal you're getting from a tree. Otherwise, the service can't usefully do anything with that information. And so obviously, there's different errors if you pass the wrong information in. So data validation, really important. But if you do give the right information, you'll eventually get back an ID number. And so Fix My Street has Open311 support. So any council or government entity around the world that uses it, we can immediately speak to. And that's great. So obviously all councils have Open311 servers. So this is great. Except they don't. So obviously we could rewrite SAP, XOR, Mayrise, MS Dynamics CRM to make them all have Open311 endpoints. And this is going to happen any time this century. So what we ended up doing, hi Sue. Oh yes, so Open311, 311 sounds a little bit like 911, which is the emergency number in the States. And I believe 311, in a similar way, is multiplexed to your local council. So if you're in the US and you call 311, you'll get through to somebody who will ask you about potholes or cats and trees or whatever. So Open311 was developed, I think, in Chicago and has then also been used in Toronto and various other places and in Europe. Helsinki have been using it in Finland and so on. But it's basically, it's a Civic standard that's been extracted from a particularly successful set of people using it in the States. That's why it's got that name. That means nothing to us Europeans. Apparently it's very familiar to US Civic hackers.
311 is basically a one-call municipal service phone number.
Okay.
Rather than like 40 phone numbers in some random hidden phone
Yeah.
numbers and extension numbers.
Okay, so bulk 88, is that right? Yeah?
Well,
Is that you?
Is the New York City one-call municipal
Okay.
hotline for New York
So there you go. So
the same in Germany, but of course it's not 311.
okay. So commenters here saying that in Germany and the States you have a single service number rather than having to remember loads of different numbers for different cities and different departments. So effectively that's what Open311 is all about. So in terms of how do we get these servers now speaking Open311, we end up using a shim, otherwise known as a hack or a kludge or a bodge, or if you're writing it in a proposal, a bridge. So we have a council backend, we've got Fix My Street, And what we need is something in the middle that will speak Open311, and so FixMyStreet can talk to it without any code changes, and then it can go away and speak Oracle or SOAP or horrible sort of details, and it's within the firewall and the DMZ, so we don't have all kinds of really nasty authentication issues, because it turns out that local councils are really paranoid. To the extent that I had to do an integration, and I went down and I got to work by dictating code to a person sitting next to me. That wasn't entirely what they wanted to do. There was a technical problem, but it was quite amusing. So we create a shim. And so my colleague Dave created a CGI script that would run locally on a particular council. And that's great because CGI, it's quite simple and it's quite easy to set up. So it'll run in a hostile environment like a council site where you have to, speak over WebEx sessions or something. You can't even SSH in to do development work. So that's quite nice. The disadvantages were, well, it was kind of non-standard because CGI isn't great for mapping URLs, obviously. So it won't actually support any other Open311 clients. So we can't leverage that by having multiple people speaking to the council, which would be really awesome. And also, it was kind of fairly simplistic, so quite hard to extend. These are the modules that I use creating a new script that will do this in a much more generic way. And these are kind of slightly more modern Perl. And I've only got 5 minutes for the actual technical part that maybe you wanted to hear more about. So Plaque is kind of the successor to CGI. It's like CGI, but without being brain dead, and it's really easy to test, and it's really easy to integrate into all kinds of different workflows. And it comes from the Ruby and Python world with Rack and WSGI and so on, and it is entirely awesome. So it's very easy, for example, you've got a bit of code, and you want to run a test against it. It's got test stuff built in. It doesn't need to, you don't need to configure Apache. You don't need to spawn new processes. It's all really very, very nice. So the problem here is if you want to do an end-to-end test, so from FixMyStreet to a shim to a backend, how do we do that? So obviously, you can stub out the back end and pretend that you're going to make an Oracle call or a SOAP call to something that isn't there. But you've still got the problem that you've got two services. You've got the FixMyStreet code you're testing and also this shim code you want to test. And so, for example, here's one of our admin pages where we can say, here's the endpoint API that we want to connect to. And there's a wonderful module, part of the Plaque and PSGI kind of chain, which allows you to say that whole URL should actually be silently diverted to a bit of code. So you don't need to spawn another process, which is always kind of buggy and a bit problematic. If things fail, you've suddenly got loads of kind of processes hanging on, taking up resources and so on. So that's really quite cute. So we use WebSimple, which is quite nice. It has very flexible dispatching. It's slightly crazy because it was written by Matt Trout, but it works pretty well. And obviously we use Moose, or rather, as much as possible, ended up using Moo, and something really nice called Type Standard, which allows you to do really nice things with strong typing, and with generation of methods like lat and long that you'll then extract from a single tuple of latitude and longitude data. So it doesn't look like the Perl that we used to write in the days of CGI.pm. So information validation, really nice bit of software called DataRx, which allows you to validate a data structure in the same way that you can do a validation of XML and so on. But it's a much more Perlish thing, and it's not very well known, and I think partly because it didn't really have any documentation. So because of open source, I got really annoyed with that and ended up contributing some documentation which has got merged in. So this code, if nothing else, has improved the documentation for DataRx. So go away and check it out. Yeah, so we check inputs and outputs. Thank you. And I ended up using XML Simple because I kind of, it's not the trendiest module, it's a bit of a pain in the arse, and I should have used something written by Zephram, who really knows XML, but I couldn't work it out, and I wrapped it, and it's all fine. So, there you go. Activism isn't just about protest. Protest is sometimes the right thing to do. Sometimes writing a website to fix potholes will do just as well. I've probably got time for 1 or 2 questions, maybe just one. And if not, then, oh, one.
How do you, if a council or municipal entity does not want to participate with FixMyStreet, what does FixMyStreet do?
Okay, so the question is, if a council doesn't want to participate in FixMyStreet, what do we do? And that's a really interesting question. I think we usually just send them emails anyway, and then they ignore them. And we have statistics about that, and people could then point and say, hey, look, you know, this other council fixed all these potholes, you didn't do anything. So that's a social problem, and one we can't solve by tech. It sometimes requires some tact, or just being annoying. Okay, thank you very much.